Xer ND 1994. Do you think wide receiver could be a strength next year, given health and what they went through this year? We talked about, the room becoming elite, but I do think wide receiver could be a strength next year. Maybe not elite, but I think they could be a really good group, right? Like Rico, with Rico Flores, Jaden Greathouse. And we have to include Faison in this too now. Like Notre Dame essentially brought in 5 freshman wide receivers, because Faison to me is like, if he was a 4-star commit, like people would be fired up about him.
Yeah,
right? And I think we should be fired up about him. Like he's a real player for Notre Dame.
He can play.
Braylon James, look, and people, I put out the tweet earlier when I was watching warmups, and people, obviously I said Braylon James and Tobias, they move different, and people, they go in snarky on Tobias, and it's like, look, and people people act like I'm hyping Tobias. It's not hype. It's just that, like,
it's just a reality.
He moves different. They move different. Those two guys, when you watch them warm up, you think, man, those guys are serious athletes. Like real long striders, explosive, the way that they run. He cooked an NFL or a corner that's looking like it's looking like he, you pointed out the NFL was looking at him hard. Tobias just put him in the blender. I mean, he just completely cooked him. Like, you have to be able to get a lot out of those guys. They're going up another year. Obviously you have the freshmen coming in. If they can get just one boundary guy, one guy on the boundary that can be an upperclassman, that can be kind of like a senior leader, and go along with Jaden Thomas, who I think I still feel good about him. So it's just like, that could be a really good room next year. And I think that's a pretty big deal. Comments from Jamie on that?
Well, I do think they could be a strength next year. Like I said, yeah, not elite I think is
right.
I don't think people are going to be like, man, Notre Dame's wide receivers are the envy of all these teams. Like, I don't think it's at that point yet, but I think a lot depends on it's like, people just want to just say, like, the reason why you can't give up on a guy like Tobias Merriweather is exactly what, you saw in that game, right? That's exactly what you saw in that game. They don't have anybody else who can do that. And just like Braylon James might be another guy who can do that.
Yeah.
You don't have guys who run, 4.4 who are that tall and could just, like, absolutely that thread guy. They don't have, like, Rico Flores, obviously had a great game. I think he's going to be a great player, but he's not a guy who's going to be like, corners are going to be scared about, like, man, this guy might just cook me here. Like, I gotta be like, I gotta get into my pedal fast because of this guy. And that's what, having those guys is about. It is exactly the way you take those guys, even though they are, all caps raw, right? Like, you take them because they have that, and it's just whether they can do that. It's Chase Claypool, right? It's Chase Claypool and what he can do with that too, right? So it's that kind of stuff matters, because I just think, like, you have to have a certain level of speed at the position. You just do. And it limits your offense if you don't have that. Even if everybody else is, like, really, really good, it's just like, if you don't have one or two guys that can take a top off of defense, it's like, teams can play you so much different because of that. So that matters. But, and the other thing though, is that almost all these guys are going to be back, right? From this year, right? Like unless Tyree leaves, and even if he does leave, it's still like 7 of the top 8 guys in terms of receptions at receiver and tight end. Like, compared to, look at this year where they had, and especially if you can consider, like, Jaden Thomas, being out for half the year really. And then how it didn't work out with Caleb Smith, and like Styles bolting and Colsey not playing and all that. Like, they got, like, nothing coming back really, right? Because they didn't have Lindsey either, right? So it was like, didn't have Mayer, obviously. Like, it was like a complete makeover. So
Yeah.
it's a big difference to get everybody back.
By the way, and KK Smith looks good as well. He looks good running around. He's a good athlete. He does warm ups, so he's not playing, but he's a warm up guy.